Welcome back to the Four Pillar Podcast, where we stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance. And today we are talking about the role of a supportive spouse. I'm going to title this episode, The Power of Supportive Spouses, Fueling Dreams and Building Success Together is our title for today. And we're talking about how to be a supportive spouse. What does that look like? And how can you support your spouse, and what kind of expectations or things that you could do with your spouse or significant other to help you guys build a better team together? Because I think both of us believe that having a supportive spouse can really mean the difference between success or not in a lot of different things in your life.
Absolutely. And I think this goes for dating stage all the way up to you've been married 50 years. Like you can always be more supportive. And I think that's why it's so crucial in the dating stage to really make sure that your values align and that you guys are going to be there for each other as well. But then we can kind of go into talking about the marriage part. I just wanted to throw that in because that is absolutely crucial. I know like Ian and I have talked about some of our past relationships and stuff, and we just knew that that person wasn't going to be supportive of a healthy lifestyle in certain aspects of our lives. So once we found each other, it was our second date, and we were asking where we saw each other in 5 and 10 and 20 years and how many kids we wanted and where we wanted to live, all of this stuff, because it's so crucial to have a supportive spouse in every aspect, faith, family, fitness, and finance.
Right, absolutely. So what would you define excuse me, what would you define the means to be a supportive spouse in today's world?
I think it's holding your spouse accountable to their dreams and aspirations. It's making sure they have dreams and aspirations, not being a yes man all the time. Like you have to hold them accountable, and just rejoicing in their triumphs and picking them up in the times when they're down.
Right. I mean, I agree to you as well. I think that's huge. And just, I think the problem with it as well too, with these days is modern cultures kind of went towards the whole, what's the I don't want to say womanization.
Feminism.
Yeah. Feminism of like what our gender roles are supposed to be with a marriage or with a relationship. And I think that's huge because that's really important, because that's how God set up set up a marriage or a relationship between a man and a woman, and it requires that support from one another.
Just for clarity's sake, you are saying, because I'm your wife and I know what you mean, women need to have dreams and aspirations too. They're like, we're not just saying.
I'm just saying from a point of support. When I say being a supportive spouse, it's going to be differently. It's going to be done differently between a man and a woman to support the other person's role in their life, of whatever ambition and whatever the thing is. I'm not saying it takes away woman's ambitions. It was just saying that it's going to a man to their spouse is going to be probably supportive differently than it is to a woman to their husband, essentially.
Yeah. And I think that's important to know, to just know your spouse and know their love language and know how to support them best, because everybody is going to react differently to different kinds of support as well.
Right. And I think what makes this so significant as well, too, when you start talking about mental health and motivation, career success, and family life, when you look at those things, for an example, one thing that I'll share is that where Kylie is really good and being a supportive spouse, where I may not be as good, but it's something that's really beneficial for our marriage and helps me, is like when I'm struggling or in a bad mood or struggling with something, or something is difficult and I'm not in a good mood or headspace, or struggling with something that you constantly, no matter how maybe upset I am or maybe grumpy that day is, or whatever the thing is that I'm not in the best attitude or mindset, is you constantly support me and what I need to be doing and giving me that support that I think nurtures growth and helps me get through things that are hard. And I want to share that because I think it's important, because that's something that anybody could do for their spouses, is to have that to, help them be better at whatever they're going through. And that's something that you do really well, that I think that has positively impacted me greatly and helped me get through things that maybe I'm struggling with.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
And back at you, I think just your drive and ambition, and that you always have a goal you're working towards, and you're not okay with just mediocrity. Yeah, I don't know. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's so good for our kids to see as well, is that you're always striving for greatness. And I know sometimes that can be overwhelming because you have a million things going on, but it's so important for kids to see. You're
Absolutely.
going to need to talk for a minute because I'm going to cover up.
Okay.
Okay.
No, just what you're saying, and like why that's so important is because if I am, for example, if your spouse is in a really bad space or is upset or is angry, and maybe they have a goal or something they want to do, and they're just struggling with it that day, and right, there's like, essentially you could have been like, just because maybe I was in a bad mood, maybe I was kind of mean that day or grumpy, that you kind of dismiss it and just basically, don't give me a lot of motivational encouragement or love or whatever, and that kind of discourages that could discourage me or not help me get through to a better place, or not push through to help me achieve better things or get through that time as easily, or keep me motivated in that direction. I think that's huge, because like, for example, that's what you do, and I think that's why it's significant for other spouses to realize that even if your spouse is being I don't want to say, I guess the easiest way to say is being mean to you, or they're just like upset, they're
Right.
grumpy, they're just not being very friendly that day, because whatever's going on, that you still, like, no matter how upset I am or grumpy I am or whatever, like, you still give the exact same love and support while that's going on. And that, I think, is huge to help people get through and to accomplish what they want to accomplish and stay on the right tracks.
Yeah.
And that's important for, I think, uh, for anybody to do to their spouse. But I'm sure it's not. It is very difficult, because I try to do the same for you, and I'm maybe not as good at it as you are. But that's really a big strength that you have that I could get better at. But that's something I think is really important for people to do.
Well, at the end of the day, I've heard marriage is 50-50, and I know it sounds cliche, but marriage is 100-100. And when somebody isn't feeling up to par or they're feeling discouraged, the other partner has to step up and fill in that 100%. You can't, I'm not going to be mad at Ian because he's having a rough day, because he's handling everything at work, and I'm, I'm not going to do dishes because he didn't do the laundry. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I'm not going to do that. And I think when couples do that, it becomes just a list of, well, he didn't do this, this, and this, so I'm not going to do this, this, and this. And that's the
Right.
opposite of a supportive spouse. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's very selfish.
And we're going to get into ways of how to show support, but let's jump to this really quick as well. Since we're kind of going into, why does spousal support matter for professional growth?
Oh, okay.
I'm asking
You
you.
want me to
Yeah.
go first? Okay.
Yeah. I said, yeah. So why does spousal support matter for professional growth? And I mean, it's kind
Yeah.
of what we were talking about, right? I was kind
Right.
of saying that when I deal with maybe stuff that probably, obviously, it all stems from owning my own business and maybe having stress and doing a lot of different things, and you showing that support. But I think that's right. Well, I'll let you answer first. But you just talk about, like, spousal support with professional growth.
Yeah, this is something I'm constantly learning and growing at as well. And I'm nowhere near perfect, but I feel like we're getting stronger as things arise with this. We own the business together, but Ian's primarily the one in the gym making all the decisions, and I'm kind of a sounding board. If I could, do you
Mm-hmm.
agree with that?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm more out in the community, like working on different boards and stuff like that. So Ian's usually the one dealing with the stressors of running the business. I'm usually the one that just writes people's paychecks and
Right.
I go volunteer at places. So when Ian comes home and he's talking about budget and he's talking about maybe an issue with an employee or a client's feedback, I'm not going to dismiss it and be like, well, that's your job. You need to handle that.
Right.
And I'm really going to, one thing I've struggled with in the past is I will automatically give my feedback where sometimes he's just looking to talk about it, maybe get my opinion. But usually when I would give feedback, it would automatically be negative, which I don't think I'm a negative person. But that's something I've really had to wrestle with myself is why do I react negatively as soon as he comes with an idea to me,
Right.
because you're a very ambitious person, so you come up with a lot of ideas and they're really good ideas, but I think I get overwhelmed and I automatically go, okay, in 5 years what's this going to look like, where I don't need to do that because you've proven that you're a good business person. And so it's really a lot about self-reflection, and we have a big whiteboard at home, not just at the gym. And so sometimes he'll tell me an idea, and if I'm struggling with thinking about negative thoughts, I'm like, okay, let's go down to the whiteboard. Or hey, after the kids go to bed, let's talk more about this. That way I have some time to think about it, to really collect my thoughts before I automatically shoot him down.
Right. And I think that just comes with having a supportive spouse is just maybe listening sometimes as well too. Essentially, is
Absolutely.
what you're saying is just
Mm-hmm.
listening to the ideas, and they don't maybe even need feedback on them. Essentially, it's just telling them ideas of what they have. And I think kind of like what you said, ideas can get maybe overwhelming to some people, and to some people they're just ideas,
Right.
and so it doesn't need to be overwhelming.
And I one thing I've learned with this too is sometimes you have ideas and then you go like, oh, this person would really be good at this. I'm going to go tell this person.
Right.
Where I'm already 5 years from now thinking, how's this going to work with 5 kids and
Right.
a house and oh, let's like, it's just unnecessary for me to be negative. And I think anytime a spouse comes to you with an idea, it should be met with support and not blind support. Like I said earlier, you don't need yes men in your life,
Right.
but you should share the same vision.
Absolutely. And I think of that as well, just with, and not even from a business owner's perspective, but even to someone that maybe works a job or you have a career or whatever you're doing, that through challenging times, if you have a spouse that will constantly give you support and not make things worse when you go home, is going to be huge in your professional life. Because obviously you're going to have stress in your job and your business. And kind of like you said, if you keep a positive, somewhat of a positive attitude, you're just listening, and then maybe you give some ideas of, okay, this is how you can fix XYZ, or this what you could do. That's so much more supportive than maybe going home to a spouse and just maybe saying, oh, I had a really, really rough day. I didn't like how this coworker handled the sale. I was trying to do this sale, or I was trying to work on this project and this happened and blah, 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 blah. And then your spouse goes, oh yeah, I don't like Steve from that side of the business anyway. He's a loser. Yeah, you know what? You just tell him to go forget himself because he's really bad at doing sales. You should do X. It just gets it can get so negative, and it doesn't help you deal with stress and stuff that's going on in your professional life. And having your spouse that has that moral compass, like, because usually if you're married with your spouse, you and your spouse should be one, essentially.
Right.
That's what it tells us in the Bible. And you guys should have your family household. You should have your mission statement of your family household and your moral compass that's going to be set for your household. And your wife, or I say your my wife in this circumstance, but your spouse is going to hold all those values and those morals and have that integrity built up and have that held strong. So maybe it's a day when the other person is struggling, right? And you go home and that person is still holding up you could say the wall of morals, values, and integrity and all that stuff. And so you have that other person giving encouragement and getting the right view on how you should be looking at things maybe when you're off that day. And I think that's huge for the professional side of things when you're going home to your spouse, is to uphold that.
And I think not comparing too, because you want your spouse to come home to a peaceful home. You want them to want to come home
Right.
and not stay at work all day. And so we, for example, have a more traditional family where I stay at home with the kids and Ian's at the gym a lot. And if he came home after a super busy day, maybe he made some really tough decisions, whatever, he comes home and he just wants to unwind. And immediately he comes home to me, who's super stressed
Yelling at
and
me for not doing the
complaining.
dishes.
Yeah, yelling at you about leaving socks on the floor, or like, I get situations happen with kids where sometimes the spouse comes home and they have to handle things with the kids, but it should be a place of positivity. Home should be a place of positivity and peace. And in our faith, we should feel like Jesus in the presence of the home. And so I just think that's really crucial. And that's something I've really learned a lot about too. Like, one example with that is Ian gets, which you wouldn't know by his office, but Ian gets really overwhelmed with clutter at home. And one thing that he's brought up a few times the past few weeks is our basement, where our shoes were super cluttered. So yesterday, with both of the kids, I spent hours, which should have taken 30 minutes because I had two kids with me, and I just cleaned the whole area. And he came home and it was way more peaceful.
100%.
Yeah. And those little things are so important. And I remember one time at a Bible study, somebody came, like, they missed a couple weeks of Bible study, and she came back and she's like, yeah, my spouse was just going through a tough time at work, so I wanted to make sure that he came home to a home cooked meal and a clean house.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't taking away from her faith or her study, because she would still do that at home, but she knew that her house wasn't at peace and she wanted it to be at peace.
Yeah.
And so she decided not to do certain extracurricular things, to make her home more peaceful for her spouse when he came home.
And that's huge in supporting your spouse. And I appreciate you doing that as well too, because I think well, I think it's big. It was when you can support your spouse by your home. And yeah, it's a huge difference when, like, just use that as an example, right? The first thing, like, you could say, I don't know what people call it, like I don't know, mud room is not the right word for it, but like the place where you have your shoes, coats, like all the stuff when you first walk in your house. And ours can sometimes just get cluttered with random Aldi's bags full of child's things that get left in vehicles.
Yep.
And then the shoes everywhere. So it's like when you walk into the house, right, it goes from, like, if you had a chaos day, you're walking into, the first thing you see is chaos, and it doesn't help you, like, relax.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge, and I appreciate you doing that. But that is a way you can support your spouse. But that's a very good point. I think that is huge, is having that support in the home. And now I kind of want to talk a little bit about going into different ways to support, or how do you show support for your spouse. And I think that's a beautiful transition into that, is talking about the ways of support. And it could be emotional support, it could be practical support, physical support. Practical support is kind of essentially an example you just shared. Encouragement and constructive feedback could be a way. And there's a bunch of different ways to support them within those avenues. And I know it's super off topic here, but I have one little thing I want to share as well for a sock hack. She's brought up socks.
Oh, good. Oh, no.
So
the
most majestic thing I have ever done, which they still get paired or whatever, but everybody makes fun of me because I never wear matching socks.
Which he always has matching socks
in the gym. But if I do the laundry or whatever, if I'm putting the socks away, I mean, So you think about it takes an extra 10 minutes to match all those things. So
No, it doesn't.
yeah, it does, especially if they're all in the laundry and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm all about efficiency. So
that's not efficient.
it's very efficient. You just, when you do the laundry, you just take all the socks and you just put them in a drawer, man. And then when you wake up in the morning, just pull 2 socks out and put them on. You're good to go.
No, the real sock hack is going to Marshall's, getting the identical socks,
Well,
and get like a 10-pack of them.
you could do that, I
That
guess.
way you always have a match. Ian and I disagree on the sock problem.
I just like having a variety. I think it puts some character into your socks if there are 2 different socks.
Ian, you wear shorts and cowboy boots. You don't need any more character in your wardrobe.
Yeah. Let's talk about ways to support our spouse. So, Kylie's just shared you could categorize it as a practical way of supporting the spouse, which could be helping with daily tasks, managing the household duties, and handling any other thing that within the home, right, that could be very practical for you to handle. It could be other ways as well too. For an example, one thing that's really, really nice that Kylie supports me in, as she just shared, was keeping stuff cleaned or organized around the house, but also too, she'll help me make my lunch every day as well too. And what I mean, like make the lunch, even maybe if I put some of the stuff together or whatever. But her main thing is like she'll make I eat like a pound or 2 of meat for lunch with just some other random stuff, and she'll help with that. And sometimes when like I go to leave or whatever, she's like, "Oh, here's your lunch or whatever," and it's already packed. And that would be a very practical, supportive way to support your spouse in that way. And one thing like I would try to maybe do for her that is when I do have time, I'll go, and typically she's a stay-at-home mom right now, so she kind of gets left with a lot of the basic household responsibilities, like doing the laundry, doing the dishes, that kind of monotonous stuff. And so when I have time, or if I have, hey, like I get home early, whatever, and I have an extra 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, like I go try to do the dishes, or I try to do a load of laundry, or try to do something that maybe helps take a little bit of that off of her as well.
You also have written, like when you're talking about using your skills, you've written me workouts and really make sure that I make time for myself as well. And that's one thing you're really good about, is if I get overwhelmed with being a stay-at-home mom, working on boards, doing payroll, all this stuff, you're
Even
good
just taking the
about.
kids too.
Oh yeah,
Trying to
yes,
I take Eden to the park, or I'll try to watch
yeah,
Rory for a little bit, or
absolutely,
whatever that thing is, trying to help the kids as well.
yeah. And especially when you bring up kids too, I think it's super important. Like, one thing we do is Ian is at the gym quite a bit during the week, and if there's a time where he has a few hours, we put it in our calendar, and I bring the kids up to the gym so he can see them, even if it's just for a few hours. And it might not be work the best in my schedule, but it's best for our family, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I know last week I was in a pretty bad mood and I was overwhelmed, and we had it on our calendar to go to the park. Well, for you to just take our daughter to the park. And I think you could sense that I was in a bad mood, and you're like, you need to go too. And all 4 of us went to the park, and it was really uplifting. And um, that's where I think it's important not to have yes men all the time, is you have to hold each other accountable as well.
Right.
And I know there's been a few times in parenting where we never correct each other in front of our kids, which is extremely important. But you have pulled me aside, and I get so mad when you do it at first, but then after some reflection, I'm like, oh yeah, he was right. It's like, hey, I think you could have handled that different, or hey, I think that was
Right.
too harsh, or you're not going to follow through with that punishment, so you don't need to say it. And you say it in a loving way, but you don't need yes men all the time.
Right.
And you need to be held accountable, especially when it comes to parenting, but also your personal development too. If I'm in a fight with a friend and I'm venting to you, and you're thinking like, oh, I wish you would have handled that differently. And it can be as simple as, oh, why did you say that to her?
Right.
And it's like, oh, why did I say that to her? That was rude. I mean, that personally, I don't think has happened, but I'm just using that as an
Right.
example.
And you do the same thing to me as well too. You can pull me aside and say you talked about parenting, but that's a good. Those are some good examples of like what you call a practical way to support your spouse. That's
Yeah.
very easily doable on a daily basis for the most part.
Well, and I know in the gym as well, we have some women staff members, and sometimes sometimes Ian's not always the best at speaking to women. He grew up as an only child, so he didn't have sisters or anything growing up, and he'll tell me that he has to talk to this staff member about XYZ, and I'll be like, all right, can you tell me how you're going to talk to her and give me a few examples? And he does. I'm like, okay, that's great. Maybe you could say it this way. And then we have that kind of conversation.
Which is very helpful. Which brings me into, we could say, encouragement, constructive feedback is another way to support your spouse. And that's a way to go about it. Is obviously one, constantly, I think no matter what happens, you should give them positive encouragement. But then also kind of what you just said, having that constructive feedback, or also, and goes into, we say, communication.
Yeah.
Would be the number one way to support your spouse. I think the number one thing in a relationship is to have that clear-cut communication with one another. And sometimes it is very challenging to do that. And sometimes because I think the part that makes it challenging is sometimes you over-communicate. You can, but then it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can sometimes maybe annoy the other person or the spouse.
It can seem like you're nagging.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, it can kind of seem like you're nagging, or maybe it's just you kind of go over the same thing or go over something too much in detail. It's maybe a minor issue, but that communication key is very, very important. Even with the gym, with like staff members and stuff too, or our general manager Alexis, whoever. Like I communicate pretty frequently and pretty often, especially if something needs to be communicated or something's minor, just to have that transparency that I'm just open to communicate whatever's going on or needs to go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up over communication. I think with that, you don't need to nag or talk something to death, especially if you can tell that they're trying to work on something. I try, and I know this isn't a perfect saying, but try to live by kind of the rule of if it's not going to make a difference in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes being upset about it. And so if it's an issue of your spouse promised they would take out the trash,
right?
Are you really going to be mad about that in 5 years if he didn't take out the trash?
Maybe.
Oh.
No, probably not.
So take out the trash and move on with your day. If I'm constantly bringing up last Tuesday, you didn't take out the trash, and you said you promised you would. That's not creating a peaceful house.
No, it's not.
And I understand that that's not perfect, because each spouse does need to give 100%.
Right.
And if somebody's not, it can feel very overwhelming.
It's not being emotionally supportive either.
No. And you also don't know what they're dealing with throughout the day. I mean, Ian and I work very closely, and we pretty much always know what's going on in each other's lives, but I don't know how much stress Ian's under on any certain day, even if I know the decisions he has to make that day. And so to be able to come home to a peaceful house, to a supportive spouse, that kind of rhymed.
Yeah, it's funny.
But yeah, you want to be your spouse's safe place. God first, and then your spouse. It should be the way the safe space goes. And same for your kids. Your kids don't want to hear their parents nagging to each other all the time. And they need to see a good example of what a spouse looks like, because they're probably going to mirror that marriage.
Yeah. And I think, going back really quick, just talking about that, going with emotional support, I think two of the biggest things you can do as well, and they're very easy to do, is just being present and listening.
Yeah.
to your spouse. And just by doing those two things, I mean, it'll probably be a game changer just by being present and listening.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that as well, too, you can't tell me, whoever's listening to this, you can't tell me at some point you're like scrolling on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever the kind of other thing is. Like, I know sometimes well, obviously we're not having serious conversations this time, but right, maybe I'm playing some Call of Duty or whatever, and you try to come have a conversation to me, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm totally listening to you while I'm playing Call of Duty with my headset on, and
yeah.
right. But that's what I mean by being present. If you're going to actually seriously talk to your spouse, is just being present. Like, put your phone down, put down whatever you're doing, and actually be present. Talk to your spouse, and then listen to them as well. And that's gonna be a huge game changer just in that. Because I bet you probably don't even realize how much you're maybe not being present and not listening.
Right. I know a couple at our church that they go on road trips and stuff, and they have made it a rule that I don't know if they totally don't use their phones or they bought like a GPS. That way they don't use their phones because they found themselves, especially like the driver found themselves pretty much just listening to the radio the whole time because their spouse was scrolling through their phone.
Right.
And they just spent 8 hours in the car and they had like 2 conversations. And that's I really admire that about them, that they they could have used their GPS on their phone, but I'm pretty sure they said they went and like bought like an old school GPS.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know if those update to the roads and stuff, but
that's an extreme example.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's a good example.
It is a very good example. Yeah.
And I also think, just adding to being present, I think you have to give your spouse their time as well, whether that's working out. Ian rarely plays video games, but that's something that kind of, I don't want to say recharges him, but he's able to escape for a little bit from making decisions and from the stressors of life. So when he wants to play video games, I don't nag him about that. I don't say anything because, and in fact, I try to maybe distract the kids so he can play video games for a little bit because that's something he enjoys. And I know you've done that with me too.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get back into it, but like running, I hate it, but that's something that I would bring the monitor down so Ian could watch the kids. He had to wake up an hour earlier, but he did it because he wanted to be a supportive for me.
Yeah. And see, I know you like to paint as well too, and I bought you a painting set.
Yes,
that you haven't set up yet. And but that's one thing too. Right, I could watch the kids or do something, so you could do that, because I think it's important to do something. And this is one thing I'm really bad about. I struggle with as well. Is it's important to do something that is not productive occasionally. Right. And I am an efficient. I am efficiency is my number one name of the game. I'm all about efficiency.
A little bit to a fault.
And productivity. A little bit to a fault. So, for an example, I don't like the word escaping. So I don't think you should ever escape from your problems or reality per se. But yeah, so she allows me and doesn't nag me when I go down. I sneak downstairs to play Call of Duty for an hour or two occasionally, or something like that.
After the kids go to bed.
Yeah, and that kind of, we talk about supporting your spouse, right? Like, I realize that for me, I'm going to go play Call of Duty for an hour, play a video game for an hour. I'm going to do it at 6 p.m. when we're going to eat dinner. And the kid, that's a horrible idea, on my part, right? And would probably be kind of annoying to her.
Yes, it would be.
Yes, so right, there's stuff you can take and give on being a supportive spouse in that.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's good to allow your spouse to do something that is not productive, and not only just allowing it, but you actually should probably make time to have actually some non-productive time, because that's healthy for people to do, no matter if you want a 99.9% efficiency and productivity in your life.
Right.
But that's one weakness I have as well, is every single thing I do, I want it to be productive, and that's not good to do.
Right.
And me saying it's not good to do, even though I know I tried to do it that way.
I know. You've gotten a lot better, though.
I have gotten a lot better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we're gonna wrap this up soon, but just not changing it, but we've seen at the gym a lot where somebody will be losing weight or they're gaining muscle and they're doing really well, but then they get home and they have to get fast food, or their spouse they just aren't supportive. And when it comes to fitness, having a supportive spouse is so instrumental. And I can totally sympathize with somebody who doesn't, not sympathize because it's not my situation, but I feel bad for people who don't have that kind of spouse because, or who's not supportive of a fitness journey, because that can be so hard. And I can't even imagine, like, you've lost 50 pounds and you're doing really well. You're working out, you're doing jujitsu, whatever it is, and then you come home and there's nothing healthy in the fridge.
Right.
Or the it's I don't know. Maybe you can talk
Yeah,
about
no, I
that.
think this kind of brings us into like our final point that I wanted
Yeah.
to talk about here was we talk about challenges and vision, right? Are two of the biggest like couple last things you talk about is having a how do you deal with challenges together as a couple, and then how do you have a vision, which I think they go hand in hand.
Okay.
And like kind of what you're saying is if the spouse is like trying to exercise and lose weight, and then the other spouse is like has waffles and whatever cereal or whatever and eating chocolate in front of you and candy all the time and all this stuff, right? It's not supportive. But also what you can do as a simple thing is when you're facing challenges and you have a vision, like you should have a vision together.
Yep.
Right. So Kelly and I have a document, or we have like essentially like a mission statement for our family, and we have a vision and goals that we both know what our basic, for the most part, basic goals are that we want to achieve. And we're aligned by the vision of what the Bible is telling us to do in our marriage and how to live our lives. And that's our vision, right? Like we have a vision together. So by having a vision together, you can help eliminate problems like that by going forward with your vision. So for us, like we're trying to raise a healthy family, a physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy family. So like we know that with our vision, like we're trying to be healthy, and that means we're going to exercise and promote healthy habits and not eat a bunch of junk food all the time and not have it in our house all the time. And by having that vision, right, it's eliminating challenges and problems that are going to come if you don't have that. And the last part of that as well too, on Sundays we take time to do our schedule together and try to talk about ways that we can support each other that week or help each other with the kids, like go over the kids' schedule, ways they need prayed for. And we do that, and we do a devotion every single night before we go to bed. And there's like some small things that we do that helps us plan, because I think planning is never going to be 100% accurate. But if you have a plan, you're set up for success with your vision, with your family. And that ultimately, I think, kind of is a one and all way to kind of eliminate a lot of, not all of them, but eliminate a lot of problems and challenges if you have those, if you kind of have that vision, and then you have your planning and what you're going to do with you and your spouse.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the last couple things is too is for couples looking to strengthen their support system, right? Or how to actually strengthen your support. And you probably know maybe what I'm going to say with this is the number one thing I would recommend is find somebody to be a marriage mentor.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was going to say too.
and you're so if you're looking for advice to for you and your spouse, how to be. It's not even maybe you have it all figured out and you guys have a routine, like whatever your thing is that you have. The thing is though that's important is you need to have that external constructive feedback and someone else to talk to that has been there and done that. And so when you find these marriage mentors, don't make it people your same age. They should be older than you.
They should not be family.
And they should not be family too. I'm glad you said that's a very good point. It should never be family members. They should be completely unbiased by the people. And preferably if you're going to church, it should probably be a older couple that essentially, with anything, right? If you have a goal or something you want to achieve, you find the person that has done that or is doing it, and then you basically copy them or do what they're doing. And so we have a couple we have dinner with, you could say quarterly-ish. I mean, fairly often. They have their own their own business together with employees. They have four kids. They have four kids. Three. Sorry. Yes. 3 kids.
And they have grandkids.
Yes. And they have grandkids now. They have 3 kids, a business together, and they've been married for a really long time. And those are our marriage mentors, and that is very beneficial because there's a lot of good stuff that comes by that, just even by keeping us accountable and just being transparent and get to share and get feedback on things in our lives from those older individuals.
Find somebody smarter than you in like every aspect of your life and use them as a sounding board. But yeah, I mean, the marriage mentors, we got that idea from a marriage workshop we did several years ago. But it's been so great having just a soundboard to be like, okay, these are the issues I'm dealing with, because I will not go to my friends or my family to complain about my spouse, because they will always pick a side, and it's not going to be in the best interest of your marriage.
Right.
And so, especially if you're Christians, finding that good, solid Christian couple to use as a soundboard has been very, very beneficial.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap this up. So we're running out of time for today. But if you like this episode, please share it. Leave us a like, comment, subscribe, whatever the buttons do that you can click to support us. Really appreciate it. And also as well, too, if you feel like maybe you're struggling or you need somebody or need help finding somebody to find you help, reach out and let us know. You can find either Kylie or I on like any of the social medias. You just search our names. You can message Jim. Feel free to contact us privately. Whatever you need to do, if you need help, let us know. We can either find somebody to help you or maybe we can help you. Absolutely. Besides that, have a blessed day. And if you believe it, you can achieve it. And we'll see you next week.